Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us today for our online seminar, Why Organizations Should Shift Focus from DEI to Decision Making, the OSAP Q3 Deep Dive webinar, presented by Dr. Gleb Tispersky. I'm Jared Clayball, President and CEO of OSAP, and I'm excited to learn alongside you today from Dr. Gleb. For those who attended the recent OSAP quarterly luncheon, you received an overview of today's discussion, but today we're going to get the meat and potatoes, if you will. Let me share a little bit with you about Dr. Gleb's background. Called the Office Whisperer by the New York Times, Dr. Gleb helps association leaders replace overpriced vendors with staff-built AI solutions. He serves as the CEO of the Future of Work consultancy, Disaster Avoidance Experts. He has also written 7 best-selling books, and his forthcoming book is The Psychology of Generative AI Adoption. His cutting-edge thought leadership has been featured in more than 650 articles in prominent prominent publications. His expertise comes from more than 20 years of consulting for Fortune 500 companies and more than 15 years in academia as a behavioral scientist at UNC Chapel Hill and Ohio State. A proud Ukrainian American, he resides in Columbus. Today, he is going to talk to you about an important change that associations should embrace by moving away from DEI and embracing data to make better decisions for their members. Before I turn things over to Dr. Gleb, I want to share our conversation will be interactive today, and he asks that you turn on your cameras if you feel like it, so we can have a more laid back, engaged conversation. And there will also be polling questions during today's presentation. Friends, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Gleb.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Jared. Really appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. So let's talk about decision integrity. That's going to be the topic of the conversation. How do we embed fairness in associations without using DI? Now, DI has unfortunately grown increasingly controversial. It has been sparking a lot of conflicts. If you haven't been following the news lately, you have probably, I'd be very surprised if you haven't seen anything reflected in your news feed, social media, and so on, about all the tensions, all the conflicts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That doesn't mean that diversity, equity, and inclusion is bad in any way, but the terms themselves, diversity, equity, inclusion, and some of the underlying concepts are breeding a lot of hostility, a lot of conflicts, a lot of tensions, including among members of your association and the broader political dynamics. So this is why I encourage you to rethink the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion as the centerpiece of fairness. Because really, what's the point of diversity, equity, inclusion? It's to make good people decisions. It's to make good decisions about other people, to make fair decisions around other people. And you can do that without using those terms and without using some of the identity concepts associated with those terms. So fairness matters a lot. Making good decisions about people, not biased ones, matters a lot. So that's what we really should focus on. So decision integrity is an approach that can help you do that, that can embed fairness into everyday choices in your association without a number of problems that unfortunately are associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what I want you to encourage and think about doing is focusing on process quality. What is the process that you use to make decisions about other people, about vendors, about speakers, about committees? We'll get into that in quite a bit more depth. So focusing on process quality can reduce bias and disputes. And so I want you to think about aligning fair processes with your mission, members, and volunteers. Now, with this approach, so talking about the legal and political headwinds, I want to get a little bit more in depth into that. But by the way, if you have any questions at any time, just drop those into the chat. And as time allows, often during polls, I'll get to answering those. So just wanted to let you know that this is fine. Just drop questions into the chat. So SSFFA ruling, the students' ruling of Supreme Court, drives lawsuits over targets that resemble quotas. So this is definitely something that the larger majority of associations don't have to worry about, but companies do. And of course, your members are parts working in companies, they understand that this is an issue. And so quotas, that is one way that you really don't want to emulate what has been resulting in a number of attacks. And in fact, it can lead to some members being critical of associations. Your associations contain members who are across the political spectrum, of course. And so thinking about that, you don't want to leave yourself open for such criticism when you don't need to, and you can adopt other strategies without quotas. So there is new federal orders that push agencies and suppliers to unwind DEI programs. And a number of associations, of course, are involved in various ways with federal agencies, with state agencies, with city agencies. Probably more relevant would be the federal and state agencies, that there's quite a bit of concerns that you should have if federal and state agencies can perceive you as being in some way having DI programming that would cause them to not work with you. So this is a concern. This is a concern that you should have and that you should be thinking about going forward. So states are restricting DI in education. So thinking about your credentialing, education credits, that's a compliance risk going forward. And boards are seeking safer paths that protect trust and reputation. So thinking about what your board is considering, that is going to be on their minds. And so rebranding is something that many do. They rename DI to something that's not as perceived as controversial or something like that. Maybe just instead of diversity, equity, inclusion, they just say inclusion. But that is something that's kind of obvious to people, and it rarely calms critics or eases discovery. So trust in stated values is only 18% among stakeholders from recent surveys. Engagement has dropped to 31% as integrity concerns rise, and chief diversity officers' tenure average is 1.8 years. So there's a lot of challenges from a DI perspective. Now, I do want to highlight that inclusiveness improves results. There's no question about that. So top quartile gender diversity is linked to 27% higher profit. Ethnically diverse boards gain a 13% profit premium. Bottom quartile is 17% less likely to outperform, and diverse teams make better decisions 87% of the time. So all of this research shows the importance and value, simple business organizational value, mission value of having diversity. And so having diversity, having fairness, making good decisions to be inclusive toward various people is good from the perspective of profit, from the perspective of performance. And of course, you want with your association to have that. And so this is something to really be thinking about. And there is a backlash. So we're seeing backlash of reputational harm. So Tractor Supply as a company ended DI after activist pressure in 2024, and negative posts rose nearly 20% among customers within a week. Glassdoor ratings fell by zero point 0.2 points after rollback, and Walmart's shift from DI drew criticism from both sides because it was perceived as rebranding DI. So this is why I encourage you to focus instead on decision integrity. Instead of diversity, equity, inclusion, you want to not simply rebrand it. You want to really change your processes to focus much more on objective criteria. And that's something that people across the political spectrum, across the cultural spectrum can get behind. Objective criteria where you apply clear criteria for hiring awards and speakers with standardized programs, grants, and scholarships with transparent rubrics and fair vendor selection. And we'll get into what that means in a bit. But before we do that, I'm curious to hear what you think about these objective criteria, transparent rubrics, fair vendor selection, standardized programs. How would you describe your association's current approach to such decision making? Please go ahead. Vote on the three options. Do you have formalized and documented key decisions, some good practices but a consistency by team and chapter, or mostly informal and case by case? Let's give 5 more seconds to those people who haven't participated yet. Okay, so taking a look, we see there's not much in the middle. It's either mostly informal and case by case or formalized and documented across key decisions. But we see that two-thirds are mostly informal and nearly two-thirds, just under two-thirds or three-fifths to be more accurate, are mostly informal and case by case. So that's something that clearly there's a lot of room for improvement, for more decision integrity. Great. All right. So let's talk about building psychological safety. What does that involve? So building psychological safety means helping people be comfortable in decision integrity, in making good decisions. So that means setting decision rights and criteria before discussions, gathering input with pre-mortems, devil's advocate roles, capturing rationales to learn and improve next time. So these are things that you can do to actually have more decision integrity and to provide the basis, the psychological basis that would make people comfortable with decision integrity. Now, psychological safety is a concept that has to do with whether people are comfortable sharing opinions and taking risks and doing something that's innovative and might be challenging and might be perceived as making a mistake. And so that's psychological safety. And so these steps set decision rights, who has the right, what are the criteria, what's the responsibility, gathering input with premortems and devil's advocate roles. What is premortem? So premortem is a technique where you try to discuss and think about in advance where various problems might occur in your organization. So premortem, it means before whatever before death. So post-mortem, you might have heard of that. It's post-death is the literal interpretation, but it's usually after an event where you then gather information on what went well, what went poorly, and how can you do better in the future. A pre-mortem is before an event, before a project, where you try to discuss and think about in advance what can go wrong and what can go right, and how can you make sure things go right rather than they go wrong. So that's a pre-mortem. Then devil's advocate is someone who's assigned the role of being critical and constructively critical, of course, of whatever processes and decisions you set up so that there's no groupthink, there's no alignment around a single opinion, and that single opinion determines everything. And then capturing rationales to learn and improve for next time is just taking good notes. Taking good notes on what's going on, why decision is made, to see, hey, did we make this decision well, and how can we improve the decision-making process going forward? Now, I'm going to have another poll, and I'm going to ask you, where do fairness concerns show up most in your world? Please go ahead and choose. Is it choosing speakers or conference programs, awards, scholarships, or fellowships, hiring, promotion, and pay decisions? Please go ahead. Give 5 more seconds to those who haven't participated. I see we have two-thirds participation rate. So yeah, please go ahead if you haven't participated yet. Fair enough. So Gian says boards, fair enough. So for the large majority, choosing speakers or building conference programs, that is the biggest concern. So just kind of thinking about and knowing what other people's concerns are is helpful. Good. Now, before talking about governance and chapter processes and decision integrity, I want to talk a little bit more about how you communicate around decision integrity. So let me share with you a tool I developed, and that I'll send those to those of you who want, is a decision integrity advisor for associations. So as Jared mentioned, I work a lot with AI tools, helping associations adopt generative AI tools. It's kind of what a lot of my work is about now. And I developed a specific decision integrity advisor for associations. And so I'll be using that to go into the meat and potatoes of how you can actually implement this stuff. And like I said, I'll be happy to share this tool with anyone who wants it after the presentation. And here is this is the tool, and I just basically what you do is you put in input like this, for example, write a brief message an Ohio Association executive can deliver to staff, volunteers, board members, and the broader membership explaining why decision integrity offers a safer and more sustainable alternative to GI programs. Include free concrete benefits for members, free leadership commitments, and a one-line tagline suitable for the web page header. The town professional associations are high context, plain language. So this is the input that you put in into any AI tool. This can be, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Claude Anthropic, you can use Microsoft Copilot, you can use Gemini, as long as you make a specific tool, and I'll show you how the tool works in a bit, like the back end of the tool. But this is the prompt that you put in. And then it takes a couple of minutes and to get to have an answer. And so I already set up the tool and asked a number of questions so that you don't have to like sit here and wait for 2 minutes while it answers the questions. So this is the prompt, and this was the response. Let's take a look at this message from the executive director response. Across Ohio, professional associations are rethinking how to deal with fairness, how to lead with fairness. Our association is adopting decision integrity. It's not labels or politics, it's about ensuring every member and applicant is evaluated by the same standards. Then listing the free benefits for members, fair access, faster, clear results, trust you can see, and explanations of how opportunities like awards, speaker slots, leadership roles are judged with predefined criteria, not personal networks, not like on a case-by-case personal basis. Faster, clear results, structured rubrics and timelines, replacing informal debates that improves quality of decision making while cutting time. And transparency. Every major decision will have a short record explaining the criteria used, how conflicts were handled, and why the choice was made. So if you remember me referencing capturing the rationales, and this is part of the capturing the rationales. Okay, that's the benefits. Leadership commitments. Publish the criteria, weights, and decision rights for all high-stakes processes. So criteria, weights meaning how important each criteria is, decision rights, who has the right to make a decision. And training staff and volunteers in fair and documented review practices, reporting annually on fairness metrics and continuous improvements. And so then Ohio associations have always valued integrity and results, and decision integrity helps us uphold both. Then fair website tagline, fair decisions, clear standards, trusted outcomes. So this is as you can see, the tagline that you would have on your website. And so this tool is a great way to help you adopt decision integrity. Let's talk a little bit about another thing that you can ask it for to help you adopt decision integrity. You can ask it to draft a board briefing memo titled Why Decision Integrity Reduces Legal Exposure While Preserving Fairness. So free item do list, a free item don't list, 60-day action calendar, closing paragraph. And so this is the ask. This is basically what you're asking it to create. And let's see what it creates. So for your board, briefing memo, title, or board of directors, blah, blah, purpose. Memo outlines how adopting decision integrity protects the association from legal and reputational risks tied to traditional DEI programs while strengthening fairness, transparency, and member trust. So context and risk overview, following the Students for Fair Admissions ruling, which I mentioned before, and executive orders restricting DEI mandates. We have legal exposure. So we don't want to, even with well-intentioned programs, we don't want that legal exposure, and we don't want to face PR issues. This is a defensible mission-aligned alternative of decision integrity. It has fairness for decision processes. You have objective criteria defined in advance. This approach satisfies governance for due expectations for due process and equal opportunity without crossing into legally sensitive territory that also has problematic PR implications. So, here are the do's. Codify fair processes before making selections. So this is criteria, weights, and rubrics for all major decisions. Train decision makers on all of these. Ensure all staff, volunteers, committee chairs understand how to apply the structured scoring and how to handle conflicts of interest, and documenting and retaining rationales. So we talked a little bit about that already. Don't use demographic quotas or set-asides because that's legal challenges and PR challenges. Rely on unwritten norms and personal recommend. Do not rely. This is again, don't rely on written norms or personal recommendations. That erodes defensibility and trust. So this is definitely an issue. Don't ignore conflicts of interest. So this is you definitely want them disclosed. You don't want deviations. Every exception must be justified in writing and reviewed by governance or legal counsel if material. Then we have an action calendar. So 60-day action calendar. Identify top 5 decision areas with the greatest legal or reputational exposure. Update or draft or update decision charters and rubrics for each, and so on. Conduct a training for decision makers and committee chairs, and then begin using a new framework. So this is a 60-day plan for implementation. Then documentation and auditability standards. So all major decisions must have a written charter stating the purpose, criteria, approvers, and documentation rules, completed rubrics or scorecards, recorded rationales, and so on, and secure storage of decision files. And then quarterly internal audits should verify process compliance and all of these sorts of things. So this is the end of the memo, and I'll show you more stuff, but at this stage, I wanted to see if there are any questions that you have before I demo further. Oh, and somebody had a question that popped up. What material is this tool trained on? Great. I'll be happy to answer that. So let me share my screen again. So this is trained on a document called Decision Integrity in Associations. So when you do any AI tool, there are going to be a couple of things you want to think about. One is what is the large language model that you're using as the intelligence behind it? And so here I'm using the OpenAI large language intelligence, and alternative tools would be Microsoft Copilot. And so when I work with associations that are Microsoft shops, I usually recommend that they use Microsoft Copilot. That's well integrated into all of their other tools. And Microsoft Copilot Studio is a really nice tool for that. If you're a Google shop, use Gemini. That's a good tool for that. If you don't have your system on any like just everything Google or everything Microsoft, then you can use something like OpenAI, which is ChatGPT. That's their famous product, or Anthropic Claude. So Anthropic Claude is a tool that's also quite popular and very good. And I use it for things that are more numerical and analytical. So for this, which is a little bit more oriented toward text, I tend to use GPT-5, which is the current version of ChatGPT. So what you do is you give it instructions and you give it a knowledge source. So the knowledge source is a document that basically tells it what knowledge it's going to be using. And so that is what a knowledge source is. So to create this knowledge source, I used ChatGPT to create a research report on decision integrity. So what you would do is you would go into ChatGPT and you would set deep research, and then you would ask it to create a research report on decision integrity. and describe what decision integrity is, just so it understands and what you mean, and have it be trained on decision integrity in associations. So create a research report on decision integrity in associations. That will result in something like a 15,000 to 20,000 high quality research report on this topic. And so this is decision integrity in associations. That's one knowledge base. And the other knowledge base is the content for this PowerPoint. So essentially the PowerPoint that we're using here, that is the other part of the knowledge base. So you have the language model, the brain, you have the knowledge base. So we talked about that. The third is the instructions. So that's the skill. Like what kind of instructions do you give it that will determine the output. So let's take a look at the instructions. Your decision integrity advisor for associations, a specialist agent that helps professional associations replace ad hoc or politicized practices with transparent, auditable, high-quality decision processes that build trust, reduce risk, and improve results. Then talking about the audience, who the audience is. Then decision integrity, talking about what it means, predefined criteria, rubrics, and roles before decision, document rationales, measure processes, and so on. Stay apolitical. The outcomes, transparent criteria, reusable scoring rubrics, document decision rights and role clarity, faster, higher quality decisions with audit trails. Core frameworks, decision charter, the decision to be made, owner and approvals, and so on. So talking about pre-mortem, I talked about devil's advocate. High value use cases, confident speaker selection, published tracks, criteria and weights, blind first round review, conflict disclosures, and so on. Awards and scholarships, same thing. So just kind of going through some important dynamics for associations. Then we talk about outputs. First pass outputs, one-page decision charter, rubric with weights and scoring anchors, simple scorecard ready to use, short metrics plan. So those are going to be things that it can easily output. Psychological safety toolkit. For responses, emphasize fairness and performance, document criteria and rationale, monitor outliers, and so on. Guardrails, don't provide legal advice, keep confidentiality for user-provided data, avoid political advocacy, state assumptions, provide options with trade-offs, and so on. And reusable checklists. So these are all the instructions that go into the backend and that determine how this tool functions. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Tyler. Other folks, other questions? And you can mute yourself. We have a small enough group that it's fine.
I know all of you like to talk, so come on, let's pose some questions for Dr. Gleb. All right, hearing none, let's proceed,
All
my
right,
friend.
let's go on. Sounds good. Okay. So let's show another next element from this decision integrity advisor. So what do you want to do next? You have this message from the executive director to staff, volunteers, board members, the broader membership. Next, board briefing memo kind of support. Then you can do a member communication that contrasts rebranding with process reform. So two-column table with labeled what members see versus what changes with decision integrity. So you're making something that when I help associations adopt decision integrity, a number of members are wondering, is this just like a rebranded DEI? Which it's very much not. It's a really different approach. It aims to also get fair outcomes and transparency, but it's not just rebranded DEI. So let's talk a little bit about to clarifying this to members, like what do members actually see? So you have the subject, why decision integrity matters for you, and say members across Ohio have seen organizations rebrand their DEI programs, changing language but not the results. We are not doing that. Instead, we're improving how decisions are made. So fairness, you can verify. Process reform that changes the outcomes. And so here's the difference in a nice table that, again, this tool can help you provide and that you can use. What members see first is vague explanations after awards or nominations. That's currently the case. And we see that 3/5 of the folks who voted have this kind of approach with not having a standardized approach with formalized decision making. What changes after decision integrity is publishing criteria and short rationales for every major decision. What members see currently, the same people or companies winning repeatedly, whereas with decision integrity, you'll see rotating reviewers, blind evaluations, and documented scoring. What members see currently, delays and confusion about timelines, versus with decision integrity, you'll have defined decision calendars and public process steps. With current processes, decisions are made in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton. Then you have, with decision integrity, you'll have written rubrics completed by multiple trained reviewers. With the current approach of just case by case, you have limited feedback or transparency, whereas with decision integrity, members could access summary reports and opportunities to suggest improvements. So a lot more trust and trustworthiness. This is trust that outcomes come from merit and mission, not relationships or politics. And our pledge is that we'll publish the methods behind key decisions, invite your feedback and process clarity, and report annually on fairness metrics. And here we'll talk about a business case. So another tool, another use case for this tool is creating a one-page business case for decision integrity in my association with 3 pillars of program quality, member trust, and financial resilience, each with 2 measurable indicators. So when you're thinking about creating metrics, this is something for you to think about. So the business case for it. And we talked about the benefits of it. So pillar 1, program quality, when we're going into the actual, how do you measure it? Goal is to improve the consistency and credibility of program outcomes. The indicators, you'll have a decision quality score, rating how confident reviewers felt that the best choice was made, process compliance rate, percentage of major decisions using published criteria and metrics. So one Ohio association I worked with cut review time in half and reported a 32% rise in satisfaction among program chairs with final selections. Great. Member trust, make fairness visible and verifiable. So perceived fairness index, where you have members agreeing that decisions in this association are made fairly. Now, how many people want, what would be the percentage of people in your association who currently say that versus if you think that decision integrity would be adopted? And then, of course, member participation rate, where you want to see how many members are more likely to participate and contribute to decision-making nomination submissions. So this is an example of benefits of publishing award criteria and feedback summaries led to an increase in nominations within a year. And financial resilience, reducing legal, reputational, operational risks. So audit compliance rate with high stakes decisions with complete records and conflict disclosures, and dispute or complaint frequency. So we want less challenges to decisions. Then we have a mini dashboard of next quarter metrics. So process compliance rate from 55% to a target of 85%. Perceived fairness index from 62% to 70%. And audit compliance rate, we want to go to 100%. So this is an example again of this tool and the kind of benefits it can get for you. And I'll show more examples from the tool later, but let's go a little bit more deeper into governance and chapter processes. So talking about how you can integrate decision integrity into your work. For governance, publish eligibility and criteria for boards and committees. So this is something that's not that many associations do, surprisingly, whereas it's really beneficial when you actually publish these things. So this is something that's really important. Defining role skills before nominations or appointments, and using structured scoring for shortlists and final votes. And so thinking about role skills before nominations or appointments, again, that's aligned with decision integrity, with eligibility, but a little bit different for nominations and appointments with the skills for various roles. Structured scoring for short lists and final votes. If people think that you're using structured scoring, they're much more likely to trust the outcome. And then documenting rationales and disclosures for accountability, which again, we talked about that. That's a big, big plus for decision integrity. Now, talking about members and what they want to see. When members question a decision, when they complain, when they wonder what's going on, what do they usually ask for? Do they ask for clear criteria and the weight of them, who was in the committee, or specific feedback on why a submission was not selected? Please go ahead and vote. So a couple of people participated. So half the people participated. Let's give folks 5 more seconds. Okay, everyone participated. Great. So we see there's a diversity of desires. Something like about a half ask for specific feedback on a submission, a third ask for clear criteria, and with something like 1/6, so 15% asked who was in the committee and for any conflicts. So these are all questions that can be answered, at least clear criteria and how they were weighted, who was in the committee and any conflicts. So about half of them can be answered in advance by improving governance, by publishing eligibility and so on. With discussing rationales and disclosures for accountability would address at least some of the specific feedback on submissions, not all of them. So you could see that the benefits of this. Now, with this approach, how comfortable do you think you would be to explain a shift from labels to a focus on fair processes? So shift from diversity, equity, inclusion, kind of labeling with these terminology, to focusing on decision integrity and a fair process. Please go ahead with this poll. Okay, see about the large majority who participate. I'll give the people who haven't participated about 5 more seconds to share your thoughts. Okay, great. So a bunch of you are ready to communicate it today. That's excellent. Others, so like about 3/5, and 2/5 could do it with a short script and talking points. Great. And we'll definitely have tools with short script and talking points. So for a short script and talking points, let's go back to the AI tool. So draft a brief announcement for an Ohio association that explains the shift from DI labels to decision integrity framework. Add a 5-question stakeholder Q&A addressing staff, volunteers, sponsors, media, and chapter leaders. So this is kind of a short script with talking points that I brought up earlier, that we discussed earlier as something that would be helpful in this poll. So let's talk about this. So CEO announcement, advancing fairness for decision integrity. Our association is committed to fairness, transparency, and respect for every member. Terms like DI have become diverse and increasingly complex. To stay focused on what unites us, we are adopting a decision integrity framework and then explaining what it means, the decision integrity, explaining it's not a retreat from inclusion, it's a stronger commitment to fairness because the goal of inclusion, of course, is to be fair to people. So you can get fairness without focusing on terms like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which have become politically, culturally toxic. So In the coming weeks, you'll see more published oh, criteria, clear timelines, and open channels for feedback. Stakeholder Q&A, staff. Will be training be provided? Yes, all teams will learn. Volunteers affecting committee work. Yes, all selections will follow shared rubrics. Sponsors, what about vendor reviews? Criteria and documentation will apply to contracts. Is this in response to political pressure? Presumably not. So it just unless it is, which that's tricky and that's up to you to discuss. But presumably you're trying to do it proactively rather than reactively. Will chapters use this too? And yes, we'll provide that information for transparency and compliance. And then a governance handbook entry. So we talked about governance, right? How do you actually change your handbook, going into the meat and potatoes, as Jared said, how do you go into the meat and potatoes of changing your handbook? So defining a decision integrity for an Ohio association, include a bullet list of 4 required elements: criteria, rubrics, documentation, conflict disclosure. So this, like when I help associations adopt this, these are pretty standard things. Specify who owns each element by staff, role, or committee. So governance handbook, decision integrity. So first you define decision integrity, the framework that associations use to make sure all decisions are made fairly, transparently, and in compliance with legal and ethical standards, replacing informal or personality-driven choices with documented criteria-based processes. Then required elements, and its decision integrity applies to all selections, appointments, awards, contracts, and grants, and so on. Every decision must meet 4 elements. Criteria: clear mission-aligned standards established before reviewing candidates or options. Who is the owner, department director, or committee chair? You, of course, adapt that to your needs. Rubrics: structured scoring tools, translating criteria into measurable indicators. Who is the owner, decision team lead, or HR manager? Again, adapt that to your own context. Documentation: written records of scores, rationales, final decisions. So having those written records, we talked about that. And then staff liaison for each committee. Conflict disclosure: signed statements identifying personal professional relationships relevant to the decision. The owner is each reviewer or committee member logged by the governance office or whatever the relevant office would be at your association. So all decision integrity artifacts, including criteria, sheets, rubrics, conflicts, and document summaries, will be stored in association secure SharePoint for 5 years. So this is the kind of thing that you can put, we talked about governance here, and this is how you actually get into the meat and potatoes, the depths of the governments. Like, what does it actually look like on the ground level? Does anyone have any questions about governance or anything that we've went over during this last like 15-ish minutes or so since my previous question? If not, I'll go on, but I'll take a few seconds here and see if anyone has any questions so far.
I'll ask a question, Gleb. How often should you be sharing this information, these processes, with your board of directors?
Every quarter is good. So obviously, after you make a transition, you'll be sharing it quite often with while you're making the transition and while you're making adjustments. But after that, every quarter is good to have a report on what's the current status of decision integrity.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, Jared. Okay. And Jean says, so far, so good. Great. Well, let's go on then. So let's talk a little bit about chapters. Not all of you have chapters. Not all of the associations that are present here have chapters, but many do. So chapters, of course, are fundamental for associations, for most associations. So what do you want to provide to chapters? You have that handbook, of course. You have that information. So for, oop, so for chapters, you want to give chapters shared rubrics for awards and speakers. Shared rubrics that they can all use in a standardized manner. You can use your conference. You'll develop for your national association or state association. You'll develop your conference rubric. and you can give that to your chapters for having shared rubric for awards for speakers. Then you want to train volunteer leaders. This is going to be new for a bunch of people. So you need to help them address their lack of comfort and experience with this approach by training them on these more structured decision-making methods. You want to also offer templates for vendor bids and sponsorships. So we don't want people to need to recreate the wheel. And so having templates for vendor bids and sponsorships is going to be quite helpful for chapters. And then audit outcomes to detect gaps and improve. See what outcomes are have been problematic and see how you can help them improve their outcomes. So those are things that you want to be thinking about as you're working with chapters. Now, thinking about these chapters and thinking about the governance structure, what area for you, so poll, another poll, feels riskiest from a legal or compliance standpoint? Employment decisions, programs and recognitions, or vendors and sponsors? Which of these seems like the riskiest? It's about two-thirds of you participated. Give 5 more seconds. Oh, quite a bit of diversity. So we have none of these is the major thing. We have 40% for employment decisions, 40% for programs and recognitions, and then 20% for vendors and sponsors. So a lot of folks are having diverse thoughts and experiences about this and having diverse perceptions of what is the most threatening. So that's understandable and important to know. Then Jared says employment decisions. Got it. All right. So yeah, but it's still like not the majority. We see the programs and recognitions, vendors and sponsors still get a lot of people who see that as the most dangerous. Good to understand that. All right, let's go on. For sections and affinity groups. So talk a little bit about chapters. What about sections and affinity groups? You want to have criteria that are transparent for forming and funding groups. So how do you make a decision on which group to form? Is it just going to be like whoever the executive director or the volunteer president really likes? Probably not the best approach. Rotate high visibility slots across sections using standards. So if you have for various sections, if you have them selecting keynote speakers or something like that, or awards or something like that, you want to rotate them across sections. Monitor participation and resource spread with data so that no section feels like it's been mistreated, it's been like other sections have been more privileged. And then support cross-section projects with clear review rules. So this is kind of when you're thinking about having a number of sections collaborating together, you want to have clearly review the rules and have, again, the transparent criteria and processes for those rules, for how you work on those cross-section projects. Now, talking about having clear review rules and criteria, how often do you publish criterion timelines before decision cycle starts? So please go ahead and vote in the poll about this topic. Okay, I see that we have everyone participating even before I needed to call for it. Excellent. Great. So it seems that The answer for the large majority is sometimes, depending on the program. With one of or like 20% saying almost or almost always, which is great, but the large majority do have some way to go because it's only sometimes depending on the program. Good to know. Okay, now let's go back to for sections and of chapters, something that you want to do is help them with ground rules around decision integrity. So let's ask our friend here, the decision integrity advisor, to produce a one-page psychological safety protocol for Ohio Association committees with 6 ground rules, a 5-minute pre-mortem script. So again, figuring out what might go wrong in advance, a quarterly devil's advocate rotation table for a 6-member committee, and a one-paragraph note on how written rationales are recorded and shared. So, purpose. What is the goal of this? This protocol ensures that every committee member can contribute candidly without fear of blame, retaliation, or exclusion. Great. 6 ground rules for committees, and this would apply, of course, to committees within the association itself, but also within sections, committees within chapters. So everything, this would be all applicable. Getting deeper into like how do you actually apply this? 6 ground rules for safe and effective deliberation. Respecting voice parity. So everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice. That's nice. Question ideas, not people. Acknowledge uncertainty. Admit we don't know. No retaliation. Comments made in deliberation are protected from personal or professional reprisal. Documenting disagreements, summarizing the minutes, and close with appreciation. Each meeting ends by recognizing contributions and insights offered in good faith. 5-minute pre-mortem script. So what does a pre-mortem actually look like? So here is the chair prompt. Imagine a decision failed publicly 6 months from now. What most likely went wrong? So you're trying to identify in advance what are the problems. First, 1 minute silent reflection and note-taking. Each member then shares one failure scenario. So they come up with a number, then they choose one, they share it aloud. If somebody else shared something similar to theirs, they choose another one that they came up with. Chair lists all scenarios visibly. Group identifies top 3 preventable risks, and then you assign follow-up actions or information requests before finalizing the decision. So again, a really good structured way of preventing problems in anything from making a decision around conference venue or speakers to anything about a grant or a program or educational, anything that you are thinking about. And of course, employment as well, since Jared brought it up. Okay, quarterly devil's advocate rotation. So, member A, challenge assumptions about evidence quality. Member B, surface missing perspectives or stakeholders. Member C, test alignment with mission, member impact. Member D, probe legal, financial, and reputational risks. Next cycle, members D and F serve jointly to mentor new appointees on devil's advocate. Then, written rationales and sharing. So every major decision includes a one-page rationale summarizing the criteria, evidence cited, dissenting views, and final vote, which is again stored in the governance folder and so on. And then talking a little bit more about committees, create a weighted board candidate evaluation rubric. Like how do you actually evaluate people for various roles for an Ohio Association nominating committee with 5 criteria: leadership, ethics, industry expertise, member service, governance experience. So board candidate. So this is just specifically for boards when you're thinking about that. Output as a markdown table, add 1 paragraph ties and exceptions policy. So this is a quite valuable tool, like I said, and this will just help you not recreate the wheel. Evaluation rubric. So let's take a look at this evaluation rubric. Make it a little bit smaller. Yeah, it's going to be hard to read for you. All right. So leadership, it's going to be 30%. Then score 1 needs development, has limited leadership experience. Score 2 is emerging, some leadership roles. Score 3 is proficient, demonstrate ability to lead small teams. Score 4 is strong, proven leader of programs, teams, or initiatives. And score 5 is exceptional, strategic leader with broad influence across organizations, and so on. And the same thing for you have a score, and this is the weighting of it. So leadership is, let's say, criterion for your board membership. Ethics, 20%, industry expertise, 20%, member service, 15%, governance experience, 15%. And of course, you can have additional criteria, additional weights, or change the weights to fit your needs, and then have scores from 1 to 5 for each one for whatever it might be, then define each of the scores. Like, just follow through or unclear professional conduct. Like somebody can be great in leadership, but maybe they don't have that much governance experience, or maybe their ethics is, not the best. Ties and exceptions policy. If two or more candidates receive identical weighted totals, then it's explaining the process of decision making. Review written rationales for each score, conduct a brief secondary review, document all deliberations, and of rationale for final selection in the official nomination round. And so then any exception to published criteria must be approved by the governance committee, recorded and justified. Great. All right. Then let's talk a little bit more about conferences before getting to. Now, before talking about conferences, I'm curious to go back on this scoring rubric example. What best describes your current use of scoring rubrics? So go ahead and take a look at the poll question. Are you using standard rubrics? Are you using some committees or chapters using them or rarely used? Please go ahead and vote. See, we have, okay, everyone participated. Excellent. Oh, so I see we have diversity. So a fifth of you are standard rubrics with weights used organization-wide. That's great. 40% are used in pockets, so you still have some way to go, and 40% have a lot of way to go because they're rarely used, mostly subjective discussions. So you could see that there's definitely a lot of work, or some work or a lot of work for 80% of you. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about conference selection. So thinking about conference selection. Publishing topic tracks, weightings, and review rubrics. So we talked about how well are you doing in publishing scoring information, and not all of you are doing so great at that. So publishing topic tracks, weightings, and review rubrics is quite valuable. Then blind first round reviews to lower bias and favoritism. Use trained panels with conflict disclosures. So have people say, oh, I know this guy, I like him, I'm gonna, disclose that at least so that people know what you're doing. And share acceptance rate and feedback to submitters. This is sometimes it's going to be challenging to do that, or if you're like a small association, but you can at least share acceptance rates. Ideally, you could share feedback as well. And within the context of the conference selection, you want also people to feel safe in being comfortable with talking, with criticizing various proposals, with like being negative about them. And so currently, how comfortable do you think people are in your committees of being disagreeing with majority opinions? So go ahead and vote in the poll. How safe does this dissent feel in your committees currently? Okay. Good. So for 40% of you, it's great. People speak up and challenge ideas respectfully. In others, there's more variability. It depends on the chairs and the stakes. So for 60% of you, that's the situation. And that's something to really work on and think about what you're going to be doing to improve how dissent feels in your committees. And talking about committees, I'm going to have another vote on these reviewing conferences, reviewing votes. How do you handle conflicts of interest in reviews or votes? Please go ahead. Vote on how do you handle conflicts of interest in reviews or votes. Do you have written disclosures and recusals? Discuss conflicts informally, or there's no consistent practice yet? Okay, everyone answered quickly. Great job. So actually quite similar to the last one in this case. So 40% of you are doing great with written disclosures and recusal standard, but for 60% of you, so the majority, its conflicts are discussed informally, case by case. So definitely, again, some work to do, probably correlates well with the previous one on doing this. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about going in depth into this. How can you actually make sure that you are doing your best to have this chapter integrity, so have an integrity checklist for your chapters, for awards, winners, and speakers. So we talked about the conference more broadly for your national or state conference, but you also want the same thing for speakers at your chapters. So how do you ensure that you have that? So let's talk about a chapter integrity checklist that you can provide to your chapters for selecting local award winners and speakers. So 10 checkpoints, a signer attestation line for the chapter chair, and a quarterly reporting template table. So what Jared was talking about, how often do you report it? Quarterly is good, with columns for decision type, criteria used, conflict disclosed, and so on. So let's take a look at this chapter integrity checklist for chapters to choose speakers with integrity, with decision integrity, not simply for your conferences. The goal is to ensure that each chapter's award and speaker selections meet the association's decision integrity standards for fairness, transparency, and accountability. So here are the checkpoints. Criteria published. Is this actually shared publicly before judging begins? Then, is a structured scoring form with defined anchors used by all reviewers? Does the judging program or committee include members with varied backgrounds and roles? Is there a blind review? Are you removing information whenever feasible? Conflict disclosures filed. Are there conflict disclosures that are filed? So again, we saw that 40% of you do it standardly, but 60% of you don't. Independent scoring. So are the reviewers scoring them independently before group discussions? You definitely want that. You don't want people to influence each other during group discussion for their scores. You want them to review and score all submissions independently beforehand. Documented rationale. Is this stored? Is this documented? Is it stored? Transparency. Are applicants or speakers notified of the process and timeline? Retention compliance. Are all records uploaded to the shared chapter integrity folder within 5 days? And process reflection. The committee discussed what worked and identified at least one process improvement for next cycle. This is at least once a quarter. And then the chapter chair attestation confirms that this was followed. And so here is the quarterly reporting template, decision type, criteria used, conflicts disclosed, outcome, lessons learned. And here is, again, submitting this report to SharePoint. So that's kind of a checklist. Now let's talk about a conference speaker selection charter for an Ohio association, including purpose, decision, owner, reviewer roles, criteria with weights, blind review steps, conflict of interest rules, and so on. Append 250 word email templates. So, Ohio Association Conference Speaker Selection Charter. Purpose, ensure fair, transparent, and merit-based selection. Decision owners, reviewer roles. So committee chair, reviewers, staff liaison. Criteria and weights. Again, you need to come up with your own criteria and weights, but these are just some suggested baseline criteria. Relevance, content quality and clarity, innovation and originality, practical application, speaker expertise and credibility. So what are the blind review steps? Staff removes all identifying information. before review. Reviewer scores proposals independently using the rubric, and scores are averaged. And conflict of interest roles, of course, address that. And then email template for acceptance. Or congratulations, your session has been accepted. Blah, blah, blah. That's nice. I always like when I get these, and I don't like when I decline with feedback. But this is the ideal type of feedback. Reviewers value specific strengths. To strengthen future proposals, consider improving this. Okay. Are there any questions so far on these conference speaker selection rubrics and for committee volunteer selection and board member?
Gleb, how often do you advise people to update their policies?
Again, I think should be all on a quarterly cycle, that responds to the previous quarter. So if you have anything that's challenging, then you should, if you're seeing any challenges, anything that's like not meeting your metrics, you should update your policies based on that. Otherwise, once a year review is good. But if you are seeing good results once a quarter, then you should just not worry about updating them and update them once a year.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
I have a question, please.
Yes, please.
This is Patricia. So
Patricia.
much like the previous section where you're talking about, giving feedback in one of the poll questions as to why something was submitted, is it recommended to do the same when it comes to a speaker who's submitted a proposal? Is it recommended to give them feedback in the same manner as to why it wasn't accepted?
Yes, so that's probably where I wasn't clear. So this is the update on your conference proposal. So this is specifically giving feedback to the speaker. While your session was not selected, reviewers valued this and then consider improving this. So yes, this is definitely the ideal approach. I understand that depending on your resources, you might not always have the ability to give such specific and detailed feedback. But if you have the sufficient volunteer resources, this is definitely a really helpful thing to do.
Okay, because in our association, when we don't have a panel of people who are reviewing it, so sometimes it's subjective.
Mhm.
Whereas for our awards, we have a panel, where we have multiple people. So should there be a different way to approach it? If like only one person is reviewing it, as opposed to two or three people reviewing it, is there a better way to, state what is found?
Mhm. So, of course, ideally, you'd have more people reviewing it. I understand sometimes resources don't allow that. So, I think it's still going to be the case that you can say at least this part of it to strengthen future proposals. Consider this, like, why did you not choose this person? Why did you like think that they could do something better? Oh, so this would be at least giving them constructive criticism could be helpful from that one person, if again it's possible and you have the resources to do so.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure. And I think there was another question. Jean, did you
Jean
have a
had her
question?
hand in the air, so I
Yeah,
don't.
that's what I was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you hear me? I'm having sound issues today.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So I have a quick question on this piece, and I may have missed it. With the when you're dealing with volunteer committees and boards, the staff removing all identifying information. How do you address, and we had this happen this year with one of our committees where, you know, we didn't do the blind reviews. And
Mhm.
fortunately, we didn't because there was one individual that was on the review committee that knew something about this individual that was like, that would have had legal ramifications. We'll just leave
Oh.
it at that if they had joined our committee.
Mhm.
So, where does that part fall into all of this in terms of making sure that, all that identifying information is removed, but staff might not necessarily have been aware of this particular situation. So I'm just curious how you can kind of navigate that part.
Sure. So it's in the first round where you remove the information. and where you score them independently. Then, of course, after you do that, you can disclose the information and then ask for any additional information that might weigh on the question from anyone in the panel or anyone else, because you do want to be aware of these sorts of, like they said, legal issues or something like reputational issues. So that's totally a legit comment, but that's where you have the separation first of the scoring of the quality of the proposal, and then separately look at the personality and the persona of the individual.
Okay, so once we get to that point, then it's okay then for the committee or the
Mhm.
board to look at that and say, okay, all right, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. And Monica asks, speaker selection software. So there's no speaker selection software like this that I'm aware of, but this is something where you can build the generative AI tools to specifically do that. So with the generative AI tools, like the one I built, you're just going to need to modify it a little bit to focus on speaker selection rather than decision integrity more broadly.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So let's talk about vendor selection. So again, vendor selection is another important area here where if you're thinking about vendor selection, you want to issue RFPs with weighted criteria and scoring rubrics. So again, same idea as you do for speakers, weighted criteria. Separate relationship input from formal scoring steps. Again, blinding as much as possible here. Recording conflicts and using independent reviewers as needed. Share post-award debriefs and on strengths and trade-offs. So vendor is going to be another important area where you want to think about this topic, just like you're thinking about speakers and awards. And let me share with you a vendor RFP bid matrix for an Ohio association with 8 to 10 criteria, including cost, technical fit, reliability, reference risks, provide weights, and so on. So again, conference management partner RFP bid matrix if you're running a conference. Cost competitiveness, technical fit, reliability and track record, references and reputation, risk management and insurance coverage, mission alignment, compliance, service SLAs, and responsiveness. And then ranging from poor, significantly exceeds budget, slightly exceeds budget, within budget, competitive with added value, or best value cost savings with quiet quality. And then you separately weigh each one of them. How important is cost competitiveness versus technical fit versus reliability and track record, reference and reputation, risk management and insurance coverage, all of these sorts of things. So again, you give each point and then you multiply it by the weights to get a total weight. And then have a debrief template, list the strengths, trade-offs, and final rationale for choosing whatever you want to choose. And then structured interview kit for panel roles, behavioral questions, and scoring anchors, and so on. And so this is just going to be for other stuff. So that is going to be a way, again, like a tool that you can use to look at your bids and think about your bidding process. Okay. Let's take a look at the case study I want to share with you about an association I work with based right here in Ohio with 63 chapters across the country to help it integrate decision integrity into its work. So it wanted fair speakers, awards, and leadership picks. The engagement slipped amid disputes over selection, so that was causing some conflicts within the association. Also, the DEI angle was causing some conversations within the board about this topic. And of course, among the staff and members were also a little bit restive knowing what's going on. And they wanted me to help them with decision integrity systems. So what we did was we mapped decision points across staff, board, and chapters. So basically, what did each one do? Staff, boards, chapters. We had rubrics created for them for speakers, awards, jobs, and nominations. All of these sorts of things for where you want to have good rubrics to make good decisions. We trained reviewers and chairs in structured methods to help them make good decisions on all of these areas. We installed audits and dashboards to track adherence so that we can evaluate what is going on with the association over time. And we saw really great improvements. So decision quality improved by 32%. So we talked about decision quality and what it means. Decision speed was also great, that it was increased by 20%. Member trust signals increased. So this is one of the things that I think associations don't really sufficiently think about, the benefits of addressing decision quality, that decision speed increases. Not only decision speed increases, but member trust increases. So members are going to be trusting you more as a result. And chapter decisions converged as well. So we had more convergence among chapters, which is the thing that you definitely want to see when you're adopting decision integrity. So this is some of the outcomes that you can get for adopting decision integrity. Now, thinking about this, I'm curious, how ready is your leadership to sponsor and model this shift? So when you're thinking about, we have these case studies, we have all this information that I've shared, all the rubrics, this tool. With these tools and this information and the agent that I developed for this, how ready do you think your leadership would be to sponsor and model this shift? See that 60% of you participated. Let's give a few more seconds. Okay, great. So that we see that leadership is generally supportive, which is excellent, but wants a concrete plan and metrics. And as you saw, the tool, the agent I created, is specifically designed to help you get those specific concrete plan and metrics. So great. That's definitely something that can be easily handled with a specific concrete or metrics, concrete plan and metrics for your association in particular. Like what I would do is I would use your association's information to customize the ChatGPT tool for your needs. So that's kind of something that you want to think about. All right. So next steps. Embedding fairness in every decision is great. It builds trust among your members and it improves performance, as we saw from this case study. You want to move beyond labels and focus on really transparent processes, objective criteria, and continuous improvement in your work. Inclusive practices are great for managing reputational risk, legal risks, and measurable benefit. Again, we saw this from this case study of the association I worked with. So start small, scale quickly, and share your journey to inspire others is what I encourage you to do. Then resources. So if you're right now on this webinar, there'll be a poll for you if you want my resources after this presentation. If you are not on the webinar, you should go, and you're watching this as a recording, you should go to tinyurl.com/DAEEVENT. So again, TYNYURL.com/DAEEVENT. That's post-training resources and support with the presentation slides. I'll send you a copy of my book on this topic on decision integrity, the blind spots between us. I'll be happy to have a coaching meeting with you on helping you integrate this. And I'll also send you a link to this agent that I developed on this topic. So again, vote in the poll. And if you're watching this as a recording, go to tinyurl.com/DAEEVENT, which you can see on the top right of the screen. And I'll be happy to take any remaining questions at this stage. So again, unmute yourself or feel free to put them into the chat, whatever is most comfortable for you. You're welcome, Andy. I'm glad it was helpful. So some of the biggest challenges, probably the biggest challenge is going to be chapter leaders who have been there for like 15, 10, 15, 20 years and who are reluctant to adopt this method. And they've often been also reluctant to adopt DEI. So they're not, it's not like, coming from that. So this is something that many chapter leaders who have been older traditional conservative are much more willing to adopt than DEI. But that's been probably the biggest challenge with getting chapters specifically to adopt it is kind of like older folks who don't want to change their ways, and they're obviously volunteers, and you're not gonna force them out or anything like that. But having conversations, having communication, and you can use that chat tool to ask what are ways of addressing these sorts of things and how to communicate to them effectively. That's one of the things that the agent that I developed is quite helpful for.
Well, Gleb, thank you for your time today. I would also like to thank all those who participated in the call and shared their thoughts and opinions. We appreciate all of you being with us and making time for OSAP. This was a very thought-provoking presentation. We appreciate the perspectives, Dr. Gleb, that you shared, and hopefully they will make all of us better at what we do. Colleagues, again, I would like to thank all of you for being with us. We wouldn't be able to do at OSAP what we do without you, and that's why OSAP is your organization. We wish you well, and we hope to see you at the OSAP Foundation Holiday Luncheon and Silent Auction December 3rd at the Renaissance Westerville. Have a wonderful day, my friends.
Oh, could
You're
I get
welcome.
everybody's attention for 2 seconds while we pick a winner for our raffle? Um, so you can
My
see our.
apologies. I'm not used to doing that, so I apologize, Monica.
Oh, I just like giving stuff away. This is so exciting. The wheel of names, and we'll click on it. There it goes. If you can see my screen. And the winner today is Andy. Yay. We will get you
Congratulations.
your $25 Amazon gift card will be digitally sent to you. And just thanks again, everybody, for being here. And Dr. Gleb, as always, excellent information that we can all use. Thank you for all of it. Have a great day, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye. Okay, that went well.
Sorry, I
What do
forgot
you
about
guys
the
think?
raffle.
It's okay.
No
Wasn't written
worries.
into my script, so I completely forgot about it.
All good. So the polls were really great. I enjoyed those. Um,
Yeah.
I don't have a
What
bunch
did
of experience with them, so I appreciate you allowing me to learn something new.
Okay, what did you think about the agent?
It's really cool. So many things about AI that I
Oh, I
don't
was good.
know. Just
I was
use.
going to show you the Jared wrapped up, but here I put it into the how do I deal with older chapter leaders who are not eager to participate in decision integrity. And here it's going to give you like ideas about how to address that, like within 20 seconds. Overload
Wow.
concern, so discretion, skepticism, adoption plan, minimum track agents. So this is the kind of thing that we talked about, me presenting for you, like doing a keynote at the next upcoming conference. This is the kind of stuff that association leaders, if they know how to use AI well, can actually get very quick answers to like complex questions that they would otherwise not be able to answer.
Just recently posted an article to our website highlighting that apparently some federal judges were using AI to
Oh,
enhance their court rulings.
I saw that. I saw that, and
And
nobody can hold them accountable.
right. Yep. Wild. So, well, thank you,
Yep,
sir, for
yep.
your time today. We do
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. And we'll speak soon, I'm sure.
I'm sure. All
All right.
right. Have a
Take
good day.
care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.